I know a lot of people struggle to understand what privilege looks like, and we've been talking a ton about it lately. And I just had something happen that I think is a really good illustration of how privilege can work. I was sitting in a Starbucks surrounded by the same three people for about an hour. There were two gentlemen sitting almost immediately to my left. They were about in their 60s, clearly businessmen. And from their conversation, you could tell that these were well resourced, bright guys. The third person was a younger guy, probably about 32, who was sitting to my right. Um, the two older men were talking about some partnership that they're engaged in. It has to do with 3D technology and Hollywood. They have venture capital money involved. It has international distribution implications. Very buttoned up, very interesting and impressive. The 32-year-old guy had his phone. He was flipping through. At times he chuckled. I could hear him chuckle. He had a couple of personal conversations. Seemed like he was just killing time. His phone rang, was really loud, so it got my attention. When he picked up, he answered it and said, "Service," like maybe he was working remotely for a service company or something. I don't know. But in any case, and then there was me. I was sitting there with my laptop, and despite the fact that I'm kind of dressed down on a Friday, and I'm from out of town, of course, nobody else knew that, but I'm dressed down. I was clearly working, though. I had a laptop. I made some phone calls. I was taking notes. The calls were professional. I'm talking about, professional things. These were not personal calls. So they had an impression of me, I'm sure, and I had impressions of them, right? So at some point, the 32-year-old gets up and walks around to talk to the two guys. They're sitting at the end of the table together. And, I see him stand there. I continue doing what I'm doing. And he's clearly looking for an in, right? He's trying to impress them. He's saying to them that his girlfriend's dad and his brother, are all about technology, and him and his friends want to get into making movies. And, he's trying to throw things at them that will create an opening. He clearly wants in either to the conversation or to the project, right? So, whatever. I'm kind of like, good for you, go after what you want, be aggressive. What surprised me was that they gave him the audience they did, right? So one of them like crosses his leg, turns to face the guy full on, and is really, really, how cool. Starts giving him all sorts of details about this project and where they are with, the patent and what the distribution plan is. I was like, wow, they're really sharing a lot with this kid. Now, the reason I was surprised was, number one, the kid did not in any way demonstrate that he had a mastery or, high proficiency in the subject matter. That was first. But second, and all I'm doing is being honest, this kid was grungy. He looked like he had been on a train for like 6 days. Visibly overgrown hair. And I don't mean like growing a beard, just unkempt. Imagine Justin Bieber with like 6 days not washing, really long, stringy hair. It looked greasy and he looked dirty. He had very overrun shoes. And I'm only mentioning this because we were strangers, right? And often the way you engage with somebody has to do with your impression of them, right? So I was just surprised that these very buttoned up professional men were giving that guy the audience that they were. And before they ended their conversation, one of the executives gave the younger guy a card. The guy didn't give him one in exchange, but he gave him a card, and they talked about following up. And, they even mentioned, the older guy said, I'm in Hollywood a lot, even though the kid didn't say anything about Hollywood, if it's easier to meet on the West Coast. And I'm like, what about this kid makes you think that, he's going to the West Coast? He didn't say anything about that. It was just surprising to me. Anyway, a little while later, the 32-year-old-ish guy leaves. They shake hands. They agree that they're going to follow up, blah, blah, blah. So a little while later, 25 minutes or so, I go to leave. Now, we had nodded heads at each other a couple of times. So, and I'm polite and friendly. So when I go to leave, I wave. And I said, good luck with your project. It sounds really interesting. And the only reaction I got was from one of the gentlemen. And he nodded his head. And if I could interpret the nod, it was thanks. And it was clear from his face and body language that he was saying, not interested in any more than that. I'm not interested in a conversation with you, period. Now that's fine because he has, the discretion to enter into or not any conversation he wants to with whoever he does or doesn't want to, right? So he doesn't owe me anything and I'm not hurt by it. But here's my point. Those kinds of things happen all the time where one person gets an audience and another doesn't. One person gets invited to drinks and another doesn't. One person gets a follow-up call and another doesn't. I don't know why. I can't say why that happened, but there were two people in that Starbucks who heard the same conversation and who were essentially in the same circumstance. We were strangers in a strange place overhearing what sounded like a dynamic conversation. One person was invited to continue the conversation. One person was given entree in. Whether it goes anywhere or not, we don't know, and that's not the point. The point is that is sometimes what privilege looks like. Privilege looks often like access. And whether you're talking about men and women, white people and people of color, straight people and people who are out of the closet, disabled people and able people, often decisions are made and access is granted based on those sorts of snap judgments. And that is what privilege can look like. And I just had to share that because I walked away thinking, wow. So sometimes someone ending up in a boardroom, ending up in a meeting, being a part of some big project, having their career take off, sometimes all it's about is having the privilege of somebody receiving them well and opening a door for them. That's what privilege is about.